So I'm going to try and read a little bit of this book called Aztec Myths and Legends. I've never read through it before. I just got it a couple days ago. It also has Maya, Inca, Toltec, and other things as well. Other subjects, other nations, and Pueblo Indians. So yeah, I guess I'll just start from the beginning. So, forward. Myth is a word that carries a dual meaning. For many of us, it's just a story that usually deals with natural phenomena and supernatural beings. For others, it's a false belief, delusional, all made up. In the latter sense, it becomes fake, a product of fanciful imagination, in need of debunking by science and replaced by the real truth. But those who tell stories like the indigenous oral tales from the 2 American continents that appear in this volume relate events they experience to beliefs and practices in their daily lives that capture essential truths about about human existence. However, they must be carefully read because the written versions that appear here are the product of colonizers, and they are prone to encapsulate a European worldview. Modern people tend to assume they're human ancestors who lacked the benefit of superior technology and accumulated wisdom, misread what they sensed in the world around them, so they populated it with needless spirits and based their childlike interpretations on false premises. The widely held Pan-American indigenous belief that all nature is endowed with life, that its properties are transferable to people, appears to have little value for us, even if such stories prove effective in guiding the everyday life of the storyteller. Let me illustrate by referring to one of my favorite creation myths in this volume, the Mayan creation story from the Popol Vuh. The environment where the tale is told is the karst topography of the central Yucatan Peninsula, a land riddled with huge caves and natural sinkholes, a fitting stage for the encounters of the hero twins sent by the gods of the upper world to confront the lords of the underworld, to determine who will control the world in between, where people will be created and destined to live following the anticipated first sunrise. To get to the palace of the pestilence-bearing rulers below, the twins first must survive a dangerous route consisting of encounters with rivers of pus and blood and houses filled with bats. The confrontation of the forces of good and evil finally culminates when the twins perform a sacrifice. One of them excises the heart of the other that magically returns him to life. Enthralled with the possibility of coming back from the dead, the evil lords plead, "Do it to us." The twins dutifully follow the request, tearing out the hearts of the evil ones, except they omit step 2. So goes the defeat of the lords, and a world destined to be free of the pestilence they would otherwise have brought upon impending humanity. The stories of the Popol Vuh extol the qualities of the hero, unlike our archetypal Hercules and Odysseus, who exhibit courage and physical strength. Their culture values cleverness and trickery, using one's wits to outsmart the foe. These qualities are shared by other Native American cultures, among them the North American Tlingit, Raven, and Navajo Coyote. As an astronomer, I imagined the gifted Maya storyteller and avid young listeners circled about a campfire under a clear night sky, spinning his yarn as he tells of the twins' victory. He points overhead and narrates the creation event that follows, to the Maya constellation of the Hearth of Creation, where the first fire to warm the nascent earth was kindled. Contemporary Maya still connect the eastern star in the belts with the southernmost stars, regal and safe in what we call Orion, that outline the hearth enveloping the smoke and the fire at the center. We recognize it as the great nebula in Orion, visible to the naked eye as a fuzzy patch in the middle of the stellar triangle. This is a wonderful surprise in the Maya story of the great cosmic fire of creation. Modern astronomy teaches us that the Orion Nebula is actually a vast cloud of dust and incandescent hydrogen gas, a 10,000-degree fire where stars are being born, many of them surrounded by cosmic disks, out of which future planets are likely to emerge, and so tales imagined long ago and retold for generations yet hold meaning for us. There is truth in myth. Series forward. Reaching back to the oral traditions of thousands of years ago, tales of heroes and disaster, creation and conquest have been told by many different civilizations. Their impact sits deep in our culture, even though the detail in the tales themselves are a loose mix of historical record, transformed narrative, and the distortions of hundreds of storytellers. Today the language of mythology lives with us. Our mood is jovial, our countenance is saturnine. We are narcissistic, and our modern life is hermetically sealed from others. The nuances of myths and legends form a part of our daily routines and help us navigate the world around us with its half-truths and biased reported facts. The nature of a myth is that its story is already known by most of those who hear it or read it. Every generation brings a new emphasis, but the fundamentals remain the same: a desire to understand and describe the events and relationships of the world. Many of the great stories are archetypes that help us find our own place, equipping us with tools for self-understanding, both individually and as a part of a broader culture. It is useful to understand that we perceive now as mythology had its own origins in perceptions of the divine and the rituals of the sacred. The earliest civilizations in the crucible of the Middle East, in the Sumer of the 3rd millennium BC, are the source to which many of the mythic archetypes can be traced. As humankind collected together in cities for the first time, the mythic archetypes developed writing and industrial-scale architecture, started to irrigate the rivers, and attempted to control rather than be at the mercy of its environment. Humanity began to write down its tentative explanations of natural events, of floods and plagues, of disease. Early stories tell of gods or godlike animals in the case of tribal societies, such as African, Indigenous American, or Aboriginal cultures, who are crafty and use their wits to survive, and it is reasonable to suggest that these were the first rulers of the gathering peoples of the earth, later elevated to godlike status with the distance of time. Such tales became more political as cities vied with each other for supremacy, creating new gods, new hierarchies for their pantheons. The older gods took on primordial roles and became the preserve of creation and destruction, leaving the new gods to deal with more current everyday affairs. Empires rose and fell, with Babylon assuming the mantle from Sumeria in 1800 BC, then in turn to be swept away by the Assyrians of the 1200s BCE. Then the Assyrians and the Egyptians were subjugated by the Greeks by the Romans, and so on, leading to the spread and assimilation of common themes, ideas, and stories throughout the world. The survival of history is dependent on the telling of good tales, but each one must have the feeling of truth, otherwise it will be ignored. Around the firesides, or embedded in a book or a computer, the myths and legends of the past are still the living materials of retold myth, not restricted to an exploration of origins. Now we have devices and global communications that give us unparalleled access to a diversity of traditions. We can find out about Japanese, Indian, Chinese, and African mythology in a way that was denied to our ancestors. We can trace connections, match the archaeology, religion, and the mythologies of the world to build a comprehensive image of the human experience that is endlessly fascinating. There's a picture there. Mesoamerican and Andean civilizations. Mesoamerica and wider Central and Northern South America encompass many countries, all of which possess their own rich tapestries of sacred narratives, thrilling stories, tall tales, and fascinating mythologies rooted in ancient civilizations. I'm gonna get some tea. Of the civilizations, it is the Aztec and Mayan that are perhaps best known today. But explore further and the stories of other cultures, from the Muisca of Colombia, Muisca of Colombia, and the Inca of Peru, to even the Pueblo peoples of the southwestern United States, are every bit as exciting. The region has long been a source of immense fascination for Western societies, from the conquistadors of Spain and Portugal in the 15th and 16th centuries to more modern explorers of the 19th and early 20th centuries, intent on uncovering the secrets of the region and its peoples. Writing of these latter-day adventurers and scholars form much of the pages that follow, giving insight to the cultures, beliefs, and way of life of these incredible civilizations. For example, Louis Benz, 1874 to 1955, the prolific folklorist and scholar, was one of few in the early 20th century who accessibly presented the fascinating history and mythology of Mexico, Central America, and Peru. So it is from his work that much of the deeper introductions to the culture, civilization, religion, and mythology of these ancient nations is drawn. Another example of an author whose work we have presented is the Bishop Diego de Landa, 1524 to 79, a very problematic character due to his anti-idolatrous destruction of Mayan manuscripts, and yet his documenting of Mayan culture has preserved invaluable information, still worth reading. However, it must thus be remembered that these texts are thus of their time and filtered through Christian and colonial lenses, and must be read with that in mind. There's a little bird there. The first civilizations, a summary. The first human beings had reached Mesoamerica by at least 15,000 years ago. Agriculture appeared by 5000 BC, and village life by 2000 BCE. Common traits throughout the region led anthropologists to propose the idea of Mesoamerica, a cultural area whose diverse societies shared maize, beans, squash, agriculture, monumental architecture, organized religion, and a 260-day ritual calendar. The first civilization in Mesoamerica appeared around 1250 BCE on Mexico's tropical eastern coast. The Olmec, 1250 to 200 BCE, created many cultural traits which featured throughout Mesoamerican prehistory. These included the rubber ball game, monumental architecture, and sophisticated pottery and jade work decorated with the images of gods and supernatural beings. The two main Olmec centers were San Lorenzo and La Venta, whose sites were adorned with giant monolithic stone heads and zoomorphic sculptures. Between 500 BCE and 700 CE, the Zapotecs of southern Mexico's Oaxaca Valley flourished in their hilltop city of Monte Alban. The city housed perhaps 25,000 inhabitants, and its peak between 500 CE and 700 CE, with the elite building 20 pyramid temples and a ball court around the great central plaza. In Zapotec religion, clouds represented transformed ancestors, and worship focused on Cosillo, god of lightning. As with other Mesoamerican gods, Cosillo was revered through ritual bloodletting and sacrifice carried out with obsidian lancets. Further north, in the Valley of Mexico, the great urban metropolis of Teotihuacan emerged around 100 CE and flourished until around 700 CE. Teotihuacan's great economic and ideological influence on Mesoamerica was due partially to its size and partially to its exploitation and trade in the dark volcanic glass obsidian, which was the steel of prehistoric Mesoamerica, covering 200 square kilometers or 7 square miles and housing 200,000 people. The city of Teotihuacan was dominated by the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the ceremonial avenue known as the Street of the Dead, and the Great Palace of Quetzalcoatl, the Feathered Serpent. Archaeological evidence indicates that Teotihuacan shared both trade links and cultural ties with the Zapotec city of Monte Alban. The Classic Maya. The Classic Maya civilization, 250 to 850 CE, flourished in the tropical lowlands of modern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. The Maya were never a unified empire, but rather a series of autonomous city-states, each ruled by a royal dynasty and a godlike king. They possessed Mesoamerica's most sophisticated glyphic writing system, a complex dual calendar, and a vigésimo-based 20 counting system. The Maya built great ceremonial centers like Tikal and Palenque, whose astronomically aligned architecture was the backdrop for an elaborate ceremonial life, including ritual bloodletting and human sacrifice. Internal dissension, Teotihuacan's collapse, and possibly climate change have all been suggested to explain the Maya collapse around 850 CE. The Aztec. Following the demise of Mesoamerica's classic cultures, a new militaristic era began. It was the warrior society of the Toltecs at their capital of Tula, 950 to 1150 CE, that set the scene for the tumultuous post-classic period. Most significant were the Aztecs, 1325 to 1521, Mesoamerica's last imperial civilization. Aztec society was hierarchical, ruled by a divine emperor and nobility, long-distance trade by the Pochteca, merchants often doubling as spies, conquest and tribute, everyday and luxury items constituted the backbone of their economic success. Aztec religion was dominated by the tribal war god Huitzilopochtli, the rain fertility god Tlaloc, and the supreme deity Tezcatlipoca, the lord of the smoking mirror. Human sacrifices to these and other deities were considered debt payments to the gods, whose acts of self-sacrifice had brought the present world into being. So, I'll start. Next time I read this book, I'll start with Tenochtitlan and the Great Emperor, not the Great Temple. Sorry, I'm starting to fall asleep. So yeah, I'll start with this one. I'm gonna mark it really quick. Give me a sec. Okay, yeah, just put this here. I'll just start there next time I read this book. So yeah, that's a little bit of this. Aztec Myths and Legends. Hope I helped you fall asleep. Thanks for watching my videos.